Good morning, good afternoon, good day, good night, good everything. As you all know, my name is Jason Weiss, and I am the host of the Ask Jason Weiss Show. Although I am an attorney, and although my guest is an attorney, nothing discussed today constitutes legal advice. This is educational, entertainment, and you have not retained either one of us. You are more than welcome to contact myself, or more specifically, to contact my guest, whose name is Justin Scott, if something he says resonates with you, or if it's an area that you want to be in. But nothing today is legal advice or financial advice. You should consult an attorney directly, and no attorney-client privilege has been established today. So with that said, now we can get into the fun stuff. I have with me Justin Scott, and whose practice is focused on commercial litigation, specifically in the energy, construction, and real estate fields. He deals with oil and gas. He deals with, and I just learned this, solar. He deals with alternative energy. So this is a lot of great stuff that he deals with. And our timing is so spot on that I probably couldn't have planned it any better, because unless you're living under a rock these days, you know that the United States has gotten involved with some situation, is the best way to put it, in Iran. And we're not going to talk politics, but we are going to talk what the implications of everything going on in Iran is all about. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with Justin. Justin, just a brief overview of where you practice, what your ideal client looks like, and then we're going to jump into, and you can roll right into it, the effects of this situation in Iran. What do you think it's going to do on the solar, on the gas, on the energy sectors?
Yeah, Jason, thanks for having me. Like you said, I am a partner with Bradley Arant Bolt Cummings here in Houston. I help people resolve disputes in the construction and the energy and real estate industries. Your specific question that you were asking there is, at this point, I think that it's a big question of kind of how does shutting down a lot of the shipments of oil that are coming out of Iran through the Strait of Hormuz, is that going to restrict oil supply? Obviously, as someone who practices in Houston, Texas, people are constantly looking at the West Texas Intermediate crude and the Brent index, and those have been going up since this all started. And so, I think people are looking at that saying, if the supply is going to be restricted, then people out in the Permian Basin and beautiful spots in the world like Midland and Odessa, they're going to be producing oil and gas. And so, I think you're going to see that shift up. But to your question about renewables and also just in Texas in general, one of the things that's interesting is there's a massive amount of population influx that's coming into Texas. And also, people are building a lot of data centers here in the state. And so a lot of the conversation that I have been following and that some of our clients are working on is, how are we going to meet that load growth that's coming in Texas over the next 20 to 25 years. And so there's a lot of conversation, whether that's oil and gas, whether that's renewables. How are we going to both build for these data centers and all of the people that are moving to the Lone Star State? So the energy and construction industry is very active, across the United States and specifically in Texas.
Yeah, the influx of people has nothing to do with anything except how remarkable Landman is. That's a great show. And you said Midland, Texas. I mean, so of course we all know, Landman is a phenomenal show. Sure. I'm gonna guess you've seen episodes of it because that's in your niche area of practice.
I have, and here's the funny thing. It's one of those conversations that people talk about where if anything on TV or movies or books deals with your specific area of expertise, I'm sure that doctors watch, all these various shows and go, well, that's not the way it happens. My feed, because I represent people who do work in the oil and gas service industry, oil and gas technology, things like that. They go, well, wait a second, that's not the way this particular activity on the rig is done. And so my feed on LinkedIn is just filled with people who are armchair quarterbacking these episodes. But yeah, it's interesting. I also would comment that it's funny that Billy Bob Thornton now has played a character on Landman who's in Midland, but he also, for those of us who remember, he played Gary Gaines, the coach of the Odessa Permian Panthers on the movie Friday Night Lights that came out in 2004. So apparently Billy Bob just loves playing characters from West Texas.
Yeah, well, you might as well. I mean, his character is so much fun in that show, and if you haven't seen it, I strongly recommend that as a great binge watch. And it's funny because you mentioned it. So, my uncle is a surgeon now. I don't think practicing. I don't know if he's retired, but I don't know the terminology. But he says that the most realistic medical show out there is The Pit. So go ahead and watch The Pit. And when I was in law school, the first day there in my first Civ Pro class, the professor took a poll of what do you think is the most realistic law movie out there. And believe it or not, I was one of the only people, if not the only person, to say My Cousin Vinny, and my law professor agreed. He said it was the number one most realistic because they teach you all of the procedure. They teach you what's voir dire, what's discovery, that the state has to turn it over, so like all this great stuff. And every time I think about law school, first I get sick and then I go ahead and feel better. And I rewatch My Cousin Vinny. So tell us just a little bit. I mean, the area you're in having to do with, renewables, and it kind of seems to someone like me, even though I do a lot of data center work, so I will put that out there, but you're on both sides of the V is basically what I'm going to say. And when I say that, that means, the plaintiff versus defendant. So you're working with oil and gas, but you're also working with renewable. So I guess my two-part question, long-winded, is A, how did you fall into those fields? And B, do you ever find like problems between your clients? Like, oh, I represent, this producer and this energy conservationist, and oh my God, they're at odds.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So first off, how did I fall into it? So practicing in Houston, one of the city is built on, energy and oil and gas production in particular. I think that's evolving, which I'll get to in a second. But if you're going to practice in Houston, you're going to represent people who are involved in the oil and gas industry. And I think the oil and gas industry provides a vital service for the country in helping to power everything that we're doing right now. And so I'm very proud to represent them. With that said, the work that in Houston, it's like they say, Abraham Lincoln once said, "Don't believe every fact you read on the internet." But I think that Houston has a massive number of engineers. That's partly because of the oil and gas industry. It's partly because of NASA, all of that. But people, when you're coming up with these new technologies, whether it's solar, whether it's battery storage, there's a lot of companies that are starting here to deal with renewable energy. And so I represent people who build things that help to power the country. Just last year, I had a massive arbitration related to a solar plant in the West. And then I also had a case related to a gas processing plant in New Mexico. And so people are kind of building, it's building energy infrastructure is the people that I represent. And so with some of that, it's basically acknowledging that we have a growing population. We have growing demands for electrification. So the people I represent really, I don't think, see it in terms of kind of the larger climate debate. They just look at it and say, we need more power. How are we going to do that? And so I think that's, kind of how I got into it. The second part of your question of, do I ever run into conflicts? The only conflicts I ever run into are if people are kind of in different parts of the construction chain, right? Whether it's someone who's an owner or someone who's a contractor who's building something. Other than that, I don't have situations where my clients say, well, I don't really like you representing, someone who's on the other side of the fence there. I think people in the United States, I think you're seeing a growing trend of people are more practical, saying, we just need to build things in this country that are going to generate energy. And we want to be smart about how we're doing it. But at least the people I represent, they're viewing it very from a business perspective and less from a political perspective. And I think people are seeing, that you can co-locate batteries with an oil and gas processing plant. And so you're just seeing a lot of that continue to evolve. And so I'm encouraged by that people aren't getting caught up in the larger, debate that some people want to have.
And I like that. And for those viewers that are not 100% sure what a data center is, it is not where you think of these call rooms that you're getting called from, would you like to renew your your car insurance, or would you like to get a new health care, or do you want to do all of that? And I'm going to let Justin explain to the viewers that may not know what a data center is, what a data center is. What is a data center?
Yeah, so a data center is where if you're going to, send in a request to ChatGPT for some piece of information, you want to understand how, what's the best. I have these ingredients. How do I want to cook this meal? Or how would you recommend that I plan this vacation? You send that request, and the answer. And again, not a software engineer, but that answer has to be generated from somewhere. And so all of these servers, all of this processing facility, that has to occur somewhere. And as more and more people are wanting to use these large language models and these AI models to generate that information, you have to have more places that are doing the processing. And so these companies that my firm works with, it sounds like, Jason, you are involved in this industry as well. They just need to build out more infrastructure to do that. I don't recall offhand. There was one of them, the AI models the other day, that went down for a little bit and apparently, caused some people a lot of consternation. And so people are very tied into this. And so building out these facilities, which are massive, which require, sometimes a large footprint, you're building a very, and I'm not trying to dumb this down, but you're building a very sophisticated warehouse to be able to house all of the processing equipment. And the thing I laugh about with some of this is the computer processing power is obviously a lot more than it used to be, but it's kind of the days back in, I think it was the 50s or 60s, when you would see these guys standing next to these very large super processing computers. Yeah. And in a way, obviously the ability we have now is far advanced beyond that, but it still is something that requires a large footprint. It's just that we're doing it on a much larger scale than we once did. And so that's the way I like to think about it.
Well, think about it this way, right? You could do whatever you need to do. You could research who was the 10th president of the United States from something on your wrist, right? You could do that research from your wrist in a screen that is about that big, and so there you go. So you could do that research, but and again, to do that same research, you would have had to been in a data room where a server was floor to ceiling and wider than my reach. But think about everything that we're asking these servers to do. Like you said, here are the 10 ingredients I have in my refrigerator. Give me 3 recipes that I can make dinner for my family in less than an hour. Or here's a 174-page document. Please let me know how many times the word he appears. So we're doing that. So yes, we no longer can do that from our watch, which we still can, but the watch needs to talk to something, and those are the servers and those are the data centers. What do you see as, with these data centers? What do you see as, some of the problems that, these data centers are having when they say, okay, there's a plot of land in Midland, Texas, and we want to put a data center up there. Justin, get it done. Like, what do you do?
Well, that's a great question. Part of the answer goes back to something we were talking about earlier, which is you kind of have these different competing industries dealing with something. And the thing I'm thinking of specifically is water. Because there's been, I think, some studies shown to show that these data centers do use a fair amount of water. It also uses a good amount of water? The oil and gas industry for doing fracking and other operations. And so one of the conversations that people are having, especially in West Texas, which, for those of you who are listening in who have not been there, it is rather arid. Some people would say godforsaken, but I wouldn't go that far. But it's one of those things where water is a scarce resource. And so people, if you're going to put these in certain locations, that's a big conversation for, the various municipalities is how much water are you going to use? And what is your plan to recycle that water? And so, it's not just a matter of saying, we have land here. We can put, what are the dimensions? We can put it here. There's a lot that goes into the planning process for doing that. But another big part in Texas is, as people from other parts of the country might have been aware, in 2021, we had a very large winter storm that was abnormally cold for Texas, Winter Storm Uri. And it focused on the fact that our grid is, we in Texas love to be independent, and our grid is independent from the other parts of the country. The problem is when the generation capacity shuts down, we don't have other people to have an influx of power. And so in Texas, part of the big conversation is how are we going to build out our capacity for transmission, specifically to areas like we're talking about out in West Texas, to be able to generate power and to put it to the parts of the state where most of the people live and where most of the power is consumed. I know that ERCOT, which is the electric utility provider or regulator in Texas, is trying to work on some of that with these high transmission lines they've approved. But that's part of the big conversation is we really have to upgrade the infrastructure in Texas in order to meet all that coming demand.
And maybe some of these companies should think about alternative locations. Like I keep thinking, I was in Hawaii 18 months ago, and I loved the rainforest, and there's plenty of water there. I mean, I live in Florida. We have dry spots, but all in all, you come here during the summer. If you go 2 days in a row without rain, something's up. We get that all of the time. And I remember, when I started practicing law 25 years ago, the firm that I was at was very proud of the fact that we had, I guess, 3 backups, right? We had a backup in the bunker, which was down in Miami by the airport. It was literally a bunker. They had a backup in another state in case anything went down. I think it was in Idaho, and then they had a backup outside of the United States where they did a lot of work in Brazil. So they had triplicate. Now you could put everything in the cloud. We didn't have that 25 years ago. We were thinking about a cloud. We were thinking, it's going to rain. So everything just changes. It goes, it morphs, hopefully for the better, but not always. So where do you see the data centers, the growth, the energy, all of that? Like, so in the field that you work in, which is encompassing all of that, if someone was in law school today and said, I really want to do something and be ahead of the curve, like, what would you tell him or her? Go in and try to take classes on fill in the blank.
So I started practicing in construction, did not have any prior knowledge of it, other than the fact that in a couple of summers in high school, I worked for my dad, who had a concrete pouring business. And so I saw kind of how the work was done on the ground. But I think the answer would be, you want people who are taking classes who have the ability, if you're for construction. I know there's University of Houston, there's some other classes, universities here, law schools in Texas that have construction law, and some have that type of work. But really, I think the biggest thing you can do is if you're in law school and you're thinking that you're interested in that type of work, try to find a law firm in your city or wherever you're at that you can try to maybe go and do an internship with and just see what their type of practice is. Because I think one of the best things that I was able to do once I started practicing at Bradley was learn from people in our firm who had dealt with this industry before, and to learn what really matters. And here's the thing I'll tell you, Jason, in a lot of these matters that I deal with, specifically in the construction industry, it's actually kind of talking to the people who are boots on the ground, who are doing the work and understanding kind of what matters to them, and learning that the biggest thing that I can encourage them to do and that matters is, what are you doing to document your work while the project is going on? And you probably see this, I think, maybe if you've ever come across these disputes, but people can take all kinds of positions after the fact when the guns are drawn and when people want to fight. But then you go back and you say, okay, contemporaneously, while all this was going on, what were people actually saying was happening?
Yep.
And so that's one of the biggest things that I learned, I think, from just kind of observing how these people work is, what are they doing in real time to document their work? And so the long answer to your question is, if you're in law school, if you're interested in construction law, you're interested in energy, oil and gas, whatever you're interested in, try to find a firm in your city that you can just go and just talk to an attorney who practices in that area and just see what it's actually like, see what their practice is like on a day-to-day basis to find out if you're interested in it. That would be my encouragement.
And normally I would run across the bottom of the screen contact information because we're going to get ready to go into a break, but I'm afraid your mailbox is going to get flooded with, I want to do oil and gas. I want to be in Houston, Texas. You said reach out. I'm reaching out to you. So I don't know. Look, I don't know if Bradley has internships, but hey, it's worth it. You could check out, the Bradley, BRADLEY.com. You could check that out. You can ask Justin questions at jscott@bradley.com. But be very careful because they're probably very selective if they take anybody. And neither Justin nor I are saying if they take 1, if they take 0, or if they take 50. We don't know. We just want you to make sure that if you're in the energy section in Houston specifically, but really anywhere in the world, that you reach out to Justin because he's your guy and he's going to help you. So with that plug, I want to say thank you to our sponsors. So we're going to go into a quick 20-second commercial where Justin and I will be right back. And then we're going to talk about a little bit more about the important thing that Justin was just talking about, which was taking your notes right then and there. That's a huge thing. And Justin and I are going to talk more about that when we get back from our break. So sit tight, everyone, and thank our sponsor. So welcome back to the Ask Jason Weiss Show. I am Jason Weiss. I have with me today Justin Scott, who is an attorney who focuses on the energy sector, primarily out of the Houston area, but does practice other spots. Again, we're both attorneys. Nothing we say today is legal advice. This is entertainment and educational purposes only. If you want to find out more about the energy sector, contact Justin directly. But again, anything we say today is not legal advice, and you haven't hired either one of us. So before we went into the break, and I wrote it down, so this says I practice what I preach. Justin talked about noting things as they're happening. So, my mother ran a preschool for many, many years. She opened it up. She helped, build it and do all that stuff. And she would call me all the time, and she would say, Jason, this happened today, or this came in today, or that happened today, or I had this conversation with this teacher today. And I would say to my mom, okay, great. And you got to do one of two things. I said, you either need to email yourself. Hey, I spoke with Mrs. Smith today, and she told me her child had an allergic reaction to a plant in the room, and we put Benadryl on it, and she approved it, and fire it off to yourself. Or the old-fashioned way, which was a black and white composition book. And every single day, just take all your notes. Well, today we're a little more advanced, right? You could put things in the cloud and you could do this. And even when I go to my doctor's office, they're walking around with an iPad. But the concept has not changed. You note it, you document it then and there. But why, Jason? Why, Justin? Why should I not do it when I get back to my desk or a couple of days later or I remember it? So I'm going to leave the tough answer to that question to Justin. I'm just putting it out there. You have to do this because, Justin.
Because once people's swords are drawn and you start fighting, people can come up with all sorts of reasons why they're doing what they're doing. And people get adversarial, and you kind of concoct these explanations after the fact of what happened. But if you really want to know what happened, you go back and look, and this applies not just to construction, not just to oil and gas, energy disputes. Every dispute that people get into, what were people actually thinking and saying while things were going on? And a great example of that, a lot of what I deal with in construction disputes is people make claims about delays. You delayed my work. I entered a situation where, this person was delaying my work. And so that's why we finished late. And the question always is, well, at the time, did you send notice to whoever you needed to send notice to saying, I'm being delayed by this person. This is what's going on. This is how this is impacting my work. And if you don't comply with that later on, when you say, oh, well, I finished late, and it's because actually, Jason and his company were delaying me. Well, were you saying that at the time? Or is this just you kind of coming up with a reason why you don't want to be responsible for damages, at the end of the project? And so one of the things I always tell my clients, and this, hopefully I tell them this before they end up in a dispute, is at the time, regardless, it should be your regular practice. You're just basically taking notes and you are following, you're following each day saying, this is what happened. This is what's going on. And one of the other things that we always try to help clients with is we basically, after they sign a contract, we say, you know what, we may never end up in a dispute over this contract. But if we do, here are some things you need to be looking at, key provisions in the contract, things to keep notice of, and try to give them a handbook that they can use to actually, take notes, provide notice, certain provisions that are really important, so they can use that as a playbook to be able to administer the contract. And in the event that we end up in a dispute, that we've done our best to put ourselves in an advantageous position to get a good result. So that's one thing we try to counsel clients on all the time.
And that's great advice. And look, I mean, we've worked with you in the past, and we'll continue to work with you in the future, and all that great stuff with me and some clients. What some of the things that I picked up from that is, look, sometimes you can send an email saying this will confirm that we were on the ground together, and you told me there's this delay. And if you notice how I wrote it, this will confirm, not please confirm that, because what happens is if you leave it out there and they never confirm, there's always a question. So it can be, this will confirm that on this day at this time we said this and we all agreed. If anything is not correct, please let me know. Silence means it's correct. You're good to go. The other thing is sometimes you don't want to send it to that other side because you don't want to do it. So you just take internal notes where you email it to yourself, or you write it on a pad and you take a picture where there's timestamps. I met with Mary. She told me there was going to be delays. She said it looks like it's 7 to 10 days, but definitely less than 2 weeks. Great. 2 weeks passes, still delayed. Mary, what happened? I never said less than 2 weeks. I said, well, I got notes here. Now, those notes there are not as good as sending the confirming email to Mary, but they're both better than nothing.
Absolutely.
And that's something what it is. It's sad, but in this day and time, you gotta document everything. And look, I was on the phone the other day and resolving something for the client, and I asked the lady for her name. I asked her, for her identification, because she was with a company. I asked this. I said, I'm just taking notes so I can, put this in my file and this and that. She gave me her direct line. Like that's how it should be, as opposed to, I called your company and they said, okay, who'd you speak to? I don't remember. What'd you talk about? I don't remember. Do you know the day? No. It's not good. And our job is to protect the client, to help the client move forward without problems. And the newest one that I like is to not force the client to have to delay things because of us, especially in your world, right? I mean, you're sitting here today, and who knows what changes are going to happen tomorrow. I mean, you're in, because of data centers, energy, and all this, your world's changing daily.
It is. And, some of that is things that come about because of, you have a change in administration going, either way, and there's different priorities, and that causes things to shift. And so, you just kind of constantly have to be prepared, and my clients have to be prepared to pivot. Another point that you were just making that I want to follow up on is part of what we do as attorneys, and people look at us and think, well, hey, I watch whatever my particular show is, and I think the attorney should be able to come in there and spend some sort of this presentation. And I tell people, I'm here to help tell your story. But in order to tell your story, in order to present that, I have to have information in order to tell that. And hey, here's the thing: I like to think I'm decent at what I do, but I'm made a lot better if we have better information and a better story to tell from what you've done in the past and the notes you've taken and all the documents. And so that's where I just emphasize to clients, even if it feels like it is unnecessary, even if it feels like it's overkill, documenting things during the course of the project, during the course of the contract, will go so much further in the event that we end up in a dispute.
So I do disagree with one thing that you said, that you like to think that you're decent at what you do. I've been on the side where you've helped my clients and me. I think you're excellent at what you do, hence why I have you on the show and hence why I'm here. But I can say, as someone who's worked with you, you guys are phenomenal. So not decent, excellent. The other thing is, and this might be a little bit of controversial question, where do you feel the line of give me your notes and help me get up to speed on your file compared to, hey, Justin, this is what's going on. I went in at ChatGPT and here's the letter I want you to send, or the complaint I want you to file, or the response I want you to give? How do you balance the I need all of the facts so I can do the work, as opposed to go into ChatGPT and do all the work for me, and then when I tear it apart because it's not good, don't tell me I'm wrong?
So here's what I would say is one thing that, and I'd like your thoughts on this as well. One of the things that ChatGPT doesn't know is who is on the other side that is receiving that letter. What is the human element? Because so much of what you and I do has a human element to it. And so part of what I always think about when I'm talking to someone on the other side of a case, I'm sending them a demand letter, I'm doing anything, is who is my audience? And you have to know that. And I mean, I'm sure AI is advancing every day, but they're not going to know, well, okay, that attorney on the other side, I've dealt with her in the past on this particular type of dispute. This is how she's going to respond. What's she going to look at? And so that's where it really comes into play of the human element of what you and I do, is knowing people, knowing the things that are important to them, knowing the little kind of levers that you have to pull in order to try to get the result you want. That's where I think the human element of what we do, I think, will be difficult, if not impossible, to replace.
I don't think we'll ever be replaced. I've said it on this show. I say it all the time. I do it on posts on LinkedIn. I think I talk about it in my books, that I think AI is a wonderful tool. So it is, Batman is a superhero who is good and strong and fights evil and all of that. But Batman is even better when he has all of his wonderful toys. I look at AI the same way. Now, one thing that I have heard is, I know the opposing counsel is, Mary Jane on the other side. And, I went on ChatGPT and Mary Jane does this and she does that. And okay, that's all great information, but that's what it says out there. I mean, look, I had one the other day where the client called me fuming and this attorney did this and I can't believe it and and I just got sued. I'm like, oh, I know the attorney on the other side. Here's what to expect. You're going to have to do this. You're going to have to pay that. You're going to have to do an affidavit that says this. And this is what it's going to cost you for me. And they're like, I don't believe it. I read things online and blah, blah. I'm like, look, you want to work with me? This is what I need. You want to go do it on your own? Go for it. Calls me back a couple days later. I picked up the phone. I called her and she was not nice to me, but I wasn't nice to her and blah, 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 blah. And the numbers you gave me were way lower than what she told me. I'm like, so can I go ahead and get it done? And he's like, well, this is what she said it would cost me. If you can get it done and your fee included in that is less, then it's all yours. Pick up the phone, called her up, spoke. She's like, Jason, yeah, I work with you. You're a pleasure. Let's get it done. Done. And again, like you just said, AI will never replace that. Never.
Yeah.
It could give you insight, but it's not always correct. Because you got to remember, AI is built on what is fed into the machine. And to all of you attorneys out there listening, yes, I think AI is beneficial. Yes, I think it is helpful. Yes, whatever platform you're using, don't use the free or open subscription one. Pay whatever it is for you to get it, because that gives you at least a little bit more security in what you're putting in. Never, ever, ever take your client's contract, feed it into ChatGPT and say, help me. Make sure that is in a self-contained portal like we have at some of at our firm and a couple others, where it's self-contained. Nobody can get in, but do not put your secret sauce recipe, your contract, your idea, your whatever into open source AI, because it's what I just said, open source.
Yeah. And the other thing, go ahead, Jason.
No, I was going to ask you a question about how do courts view AI in Houston, but I'd be curious to what you were going to say.
No, what I was going to say, and this is actually going to bleed into, I think, your question there is, I think the thing with AI, and I completely agree, it is a tool, but it's not going to be something that is a substitute for what we do. And it's kind of the old Reagan line about the Soviets, right? It's trust but verify. And so that's always, one of the things that we, our firm, I'm sure like yours, has developed a policy for people using it. And I don't know that there's been too much activity that's kind of come specifically out of, some of the courts in Houston related to the use of AI, but we're all cognizant of these opinions that I'm sure all of us are aware of coming out of various places. A lot of them are coming out of the Southern District of New York. I know that a former Bradley partner who was on the federal bench in Alabama, she issued a very strong opinion related to the use of AI, and basically where people are using it and they're using it, and then essentially they're not verifying that the information that's in there is accurate. We've all heard about these cases that get hallucinated, and people end up citing cases that never existed. And so I just think it's one of those things where you can use it as a research tool, use it to generate ideas, but it always needs to be done with the idea, like you said, of who am I sharing this information with, number one. And then number two, the product that I'm getting there, using the human element of what I know about this case, what I know about everything, is it accurate? And so just not turning our brains off, because that's what clients pay us to do, right? They pay us to use our minds. And so anything that you think, this obviates the need for me to think, you're probably going down the wrong road if that's what you're thinking. And so, yeah, I think we're very cognizant of everything that's going on and trying to, make sure that we're giving good direction to everyone in the firm about how to use AI.
And I would treat AI as an intern or a very, very green attorney, right? You send them off and you do this. And I remember, when I opened my own firm, that I would say, hey, look, here's a sample motion to dismiss for you to use, but don't take the law that's in there as gospel. Go on Westlaw, check it out. And look, I worked on something the other night where I happened to have a ChatGPT open, and I had my motion in there, and I didn't like the way a sentence was reading, so I threw it in, made it better, and I said, hey, give me a case that supports this. And it came up with a case, and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. But I didn't use the case. I went into Westlaw, put the citation in. It was a real case, but it didn't hold what ChatGPT said it held. Now, it linked me to 2 other cases, so I got to where I needed, but otherwise I would have had, Smith versus Smith, and the judge may have looked it up and be like, no, that's not what this says. But if I went down the trail further, Watson versus Barnett Bank, that was the case that I needed. So again, we have to be very, very, very careful. So I can't believe we're at 40 minutes already. Our show is about to be over. And for those that are loyal listeners, thank you. And for those that are first-time listeners, this will be a treat. I never tell the guest, but I always hold my hardest question for the last 60 seconds of the show. So, Justin, here we go. Ready?
Ready.
All right. On any streaming platform that you watch, what are you currently watching, and what could you recommend for somebody else to watch?
So what are we currently watching? My wife and I became big fans a few years ago of Drive to Survive, the Formula One series. We came that in the beginning of the 2021 season, which if anyone was an F1 fan, was the great Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen season. And so we need to watch that. It just came out. The first race of the season is actually this weekend in Australia. So that's one of the things we need to get caught up on. But I have 5 kids, and so we were trying to introduce them to good comedy. And so one of the things we started last night was rewatching Parks and Recreation, which is my favorite sitcom of all time. I think that's partially due to the fact that my dad is a Hoosier, and so I see a little bit of the native Indiana when we watch that show. So those are a couple of things we're watching.
And remind me, who are the stars of Parks and Recs?
Amy Poehler, Nick Offerman, Aziz Ansari. There are a few of the big folks.
Coleco?
Oh, I'm not sure. And then what's his name? The guy who was in Guardians of the Galaxy, Chris Pratt, is also in the show.
Yep, yeah. Chris Pratt's in it. Yep. So there's a plug for Park and Recs. Here's the plug for look. Anything in the oil, gas, energy, renewable space. Bradley is a firm that is more than just Texas, correct?
That's correct. We're all across the Southeast. Yep.
So they're all across the Southeast. So you might not fall in the Houston area where Justin is, but you could still call him. He'll get you with the right partner. They'll take care of you. And again, I can attest firsthand, they do phenomenal work. Justin does excellent work, and excellent is better than phenomenal in my book. So Justin, thank you for being here. Look forward to seeing what's going on. Look forward to changes. And to all the listeners, thank you for being here. Thank you, newstreamingnetwork.com. Thank you, goingbold.com. And thank you to the wonderful team that allows this show to happen. We'll see you all in 2 weeks. Take care.